tyranny's only, a generation away or not that far away.
In 1984, the significance for Sikhs specifically is there was a genocide. The mob went around from house to house pulling out Sikhs and killed them.
In 1984, they talk about, wrong speak and, the Ministry of Truth and all those sorts of things. Dad used to talk about the memory hole.
People are interacting with their companions as human form. This person is already socially isolated, wants to be in a relationship with this AI companion and want to get married.
You either always know you're disconnected or you end up actually in a kind of a delusional state. It's much, much easier just to go, I'm just going to get companionship from this machine.
Before we get started, please subscribe so that you never miss an episode of our cutting-edge contemporary conversations. Thank you.
Welcome, Phil. How are you?
Very well, thanks, Dev. Glad to be here.
Thank you for your time today. I've been observing your work and your politics, and I saw your opening speech at the Parliament, which gave me a bit of a context on who you are, what your background and what your beliefs are and your values. But if I ask for the audience, because we want to talk a lot about your values, the freedoms you talked about, but before that, could I ask you to give a brief background and your story?
My story?
Yeah.
How far back do you want to go? Well, I was born in Sydney, but didn't spend very long there.
Uh-huh.
My father came over on a boat from England, 10-pound pond, where he met my mother.
Uh-huh.
And my brother and I were in Sydney, and then he moved over to Karratha back in the very, very early days of the 70s as a mining engineer. Mm-hmm. And where he came like a lot of people did to seek his fortune, I suppose. Mm-hmm. So I grew up for the first 10 years of my life up in Karratha as it was growing from this tiny little mining town, company town into, we had Hammersley, Dampier Salt, and then Woodside came along and started to grow. Mm-hmm. That all ended when my father lost his business being black banned during the heavy days of the unions up in Dampier and Karratha. And we were going to travel around Australia in a bus. And I think my mother didn't like that idea. So Dad got a job as a site manager up at Shark Bay Salt, up at Useless Loop of all places. And so they lived there for 13 years. I was there for a couple of years before I went to boarding school in Geraldton. Boarding school was fun in some respects, but didn't agree with me in other respects. So I guess...
At what age did you go?
At 12.
Uh-huh.
So from 12 to 16, I went to boarding school. I was a reasonably smart kid, but I was a frustrated kid, which resulted in me a few things happening. I ended up moving up to Karratha for probably 6 months before I ended up going to the Navy when I was 16. So I spent about 7 years in the Navy. As I did a trade as a fitter machinist, sort of did a bunch of deployments up into Southeast Asia and the sort of Pacific, Indian Pacific, those sorts of areas. And then got out of the Navy, paid off, as we say, about the mid-90s, and then went into oil and gas from that point. And I got caught up in the middle of the oil price crash of the late 90s and ended up starting my own business for a couple of years before going back to study, going into the Army Reserve, finishing my study, and then I went and ended up back in oil and gas. So I had a decision to make when I graduated in 2006 as a 36-year-old. So I did a degree in political science and history and honours in international relations. And there were two areas that I sort of really looked at and thought were the growth areas that were going to be very important in the history of the future of Western Australia, and that was oil and gas or defence. And I looked at both. I was in the Army Reserve at that time, and I looked at going full time. But having 6 kids, Afghanistan kicking off again, me knowing what kind of a person I was, decided that I needed to. I couldn't stay in the Army Reserve. I had to take care of my family, and ended up in oil and gas, and so spent the next 15, 16 years in oil and gas until around about 2020. And then I had a small business again for a little while, making furniture and doing those sort of things as I worked through some where I wanted to be. And it was actually whether, yeah, I was sort of working through, where I needed to be as a person, I suppose. And this is, I'm 50 years old by this stage and still working it out. And it was really the referendum for the Voice referendum that I realised that I was still very much interested and driven to be in politics. Absolutely love making furniture, love that business, love that world. But there's just something that keeps drawing me back into service. Sometimes a little frustratingly, because there's days I'd love to be cutting dovetails and doing things like that. But nothing that draws me the way it has into service in politics again. And where I am now, after winning the election this part of the election, my part in it, in March this year, has sort of confirmed that I feel that this is very much the right place for me to be. And I'll, as long as I can be here and do what I'm doing, am I settled? You're never settled. I'm not settled in this job. There's a lot of things that I need to do, but I'm very, very pleased and glad to be here, and I feel very comfortable in terms of this is where I should be.
Just a digression from there. There's a TV series on Geraldton being made about how rough Geraldton was back in the days. So just a side note, if you want to comment on that, but that's fine. The idea of service has continued across your life, and across multiple roles, what you did. How has that came to you as a young man, when somebody is, you are thinking of things, what you want to do and what you want to be. So how has that idea of service evolved within your life?
It's a strange one, because it's not, when I first joined the Navy, part of it was I needed to find somewhere to go. And it's an interesting story. I was actually looking at joining the Army, but ended up in the Navy. And that's another little segue as well, a side story as well. But when I joined, there was very much the advertising around defence then, and Navy in particular, was you'll be cold, you'll be wet, you'll be frightened, but the pride of the fleet will be you. And it was about this sense of service and a sense of pride of defending your country and serving your country. And as a young kid, I always wanted to serve one way or the other. As a really young kid, I wanted to be a soldier, as lots of kids do. As I got older, I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to fly F-111s. My love of surfing and windsurfing at boarding school kind of put a bit of an end to that, and a few attitude problems in Geraldton sort of put a bit of a dent in that. So I ended up in the Navy at 16. But yeah, there is that sense of service, but it's strange. It's not like I've suddenly gone, I just want to find something to serve my country. It was always, at that age, it was always something. The military felt like that was where I could serve. And I've always had that sense of, if things go horribly wrong, I'll be in their boots and all. I still feel that. I'm probably in the wrong job for that now and probably shouldn't. And this is why I went, part of the reason when I went back into the Army Reserve joined it I was a 34-year-old. When I went to the Army Reserve, part of it was why I had to make the decision to step out, because I was thinking of going full-time into the Army and taking my family with me to Canberra and going through Duntroon and finishing all of that, because I knew what I was, that if I was in full-time in the Army, then my driver would be to serve wherever they sent me. I kind of have a very strong sense of that, and it's a little bit again like in politics. I have trouble sometimes putting the brakes on. It's like, okay, make sure you step back and leave enough time for yourself and your family. You're there to serve. You're there to actually get in and work hard and give the people, I guess it's kind of a vulgar way of putting it, give them their money's worth out of you. They've got their money's worth out of me, out of Navy in particular and defence, but people, there's an expectation of service, and I feel that very keenly.
How has your political values or political ideologies or worldview evolved? Was it through education or was it through service? And is there a mix there?
It's a bit of a mix. I grew up with a father who was very, very acutely aware of what was going on in the world. his father was actually more or less a communist, very, very much involved in the unions in the Midlands mines in Nottinghamshire in England. Very much the union convener. So my dad came out to Australia in the late 60s, really around that turn of the 60s, 70s, which was Cold War. Vietnam War was still on. The first thing he did when he came to, one of the first things he did when he came to Australia was he joined the CMF. So he joined the reserves and became a commando with the CMF. And he had a sense that something was happening. The domino theory was very prevalent at that point. There's big fears about communism coming down sort of through the Malaya, through Southeast Asia, Malaya Peninsula, Indonesia. So I grew up with that. I grew up with a father who had an absolute revulsion to any form of tyranny. So I grew up with George Orwell. I grew up with all of those stories. I grew up with the stories of my dad's English, despite coming from very much that unionist background. He had very much that sense of empire. He was very much a fan of Winston Churchill. He grew up as a kid hearing the stories of Churchill and Britain being saved from the Nazi rule of or the Nazi threat essentially to the world. So I grew up with all of that. When we moved across to Karratha, that sense that the world was not necessarily was it a safe place? Karratha was reasonably safe, but we were taught essentially how to find water in the bush survival, bushcraft. Dad had a crossbow not because he was an enthusiast, it was because he figured if something went wrong, then we would head bush and we'd know where the water holes were. We would head out to the bush and he would look after his family that way. And I thought that was perfectly normal until I was about 20. You're telling people about that. And he wasn't a prepper. He wasn't anything like that. He wasn't he never owned guns, none of that, but it was just that being ready in case something happened, because he'd grown up at the end. Well, he was born during the Second World War, and that sense that the world was not a static place, that it can change and it can change rapidly and it can change very badly. So I kind of grew up with that, which I guess as a kid, as you're growing up, you think you're thinking through those scenarios. I remember reading 1984, and just wondering. And I remember the year that the New Year's Eve of 1984. I remember thinking maybe this is the year. So just acutely aware that tyranny's only a generation away, or it's not that far away. I don't know if that's a normal way to grow up, but
it's a function of people who are weak in the power. And then that lets the tyranny come over. Yeah. So then people who are privileged enough to have in the positions of power when they are weaker, that's when tyranny takes over. Yeah. In 1984, the significance for Sikhs specifically is there was a genocide end of October. I was born on the 5th. Genocide happened on the 30th, 31st. All right. Couple of tens of thousands of people died in a matter of 2 days, which was orchestrated by mobs, and they had the whole list of the electoral roll. Right. And with Sikhs, you can identify you're a Sikh by the last name. Yeah. So if you have electoral roll, the home address, who lives there, and the mob went around from house to house pulling out Sikhs. Yeah. And killed them. Yeah. So that's part of tyranny. Yeah. We think it doesn't. Yeah, we think it can't happen. And I know, we were talking earlier that, we're talking about privilege. Yeah. And I feel immensely privileged to have been born in Australia. We've had we won the lottery of life, essentially. The opportunities for everyone in this country are phenomenal. But at the same time, the stability of government that we have, and we still have it, and it's incredible to see. And we take it for granted. Again, we go, okay, we just had a couple of elections. And we went, okay, right. Well, some of them didn't take over. It was like, okay, we're going to see whether we can change government. We didn't state and federal for Western Australia this time around. But when we do change government, it's like, okay,
pack up your boxes and get them out, and we'll bring our boxes in and our people in, and that's it.
Yeah.
There's a few people shed a few tears and drink probably more beers than they should do, drowning their sorrows. But that's the extent.
The handover of power.
The handover of power. And I don't think people understand how much of really something of a miracle that is historically, because power historically has not been handed over that
easily.
That easily. And you read the history of, even the history of England, the history of Europe, the Chinese histories, you read those, from dynasty to dynasty and from family to family. It's once one lot takes over, it's not you like go out, okay, you're out of the house. It's like you're gone,
dead.
You're dead. And that's the history of. That's kind of been a lot of the history of humanity. That it's something that we can't even comprehend in the world that we're in.
Coming back to the worldview on your politics and in your beliefs. So as reading 1984 as a young man, how I would not be able to digest that at that young age. I don't think so. I was not that probably smart.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I did either. And I've reread it and reread the book and rewatched the movie a few times.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How does that frame you, and how does that set you apart, or creates the idea of thinking differently or thinking?
I think it's more thinking, maybe it's thinking differently to some. I hold a very high view of truth. I have a very high view of freedom of speech, because you look at the 1984. They talk about wrong speak and the Ministry of Truth and all those sorts of things. That there's certain things you're not allowed to talk about. I grew up with the Dad used to talk about the memory hole. There's certain things you're not allowed to talk about, and people disappear from the memory. So I think, I kind of very much believe that you shall know the truth and the truth will set you free. I think the miracle, I think, in some respects, of the Westminster system, and I think the Australian system is the best of a couple of worlds. So it's got the US system of the two houses, the Senate, and we've got in Australia, in West Australia, we've got essentially the Westminster parliamentary system as well. But the idea of that is that it gives this free and open forum of debate. So when I see truth being twisted or truth being suppressed or language being used to suppress speech, to say things like, what are we talking about? Like some of the things, labeling things to me is usually it's a warning sign. When someone says you're a denier, you're a phobe. Skeptic's okay, but the skeptic, even these words get weaponized. So in 1984, you sort of see the weaponization of language within that. And I guess part of it's through growing up that way, but it's also part of the training that I had in political science and international relations, and seeing how language can be weaponized, and just having a radar for whenever you start to shift away from free and open discussion about things and start to label people, and you call someone a name rather than actually engage with the argument that they're having, then to me that's a warning sign that something's going wrong. If your ideas are that good, then they should stand up under public scrutiny. I very much believe in that, including my ideas. I have strong views. I'm a Christian. I'm happy for people to challenge those ideas. And as a young sailor, I went to sea at 19, and I was a Christian at sea, and that was very challenging because there were a lot of people there who weren't. When you're a sailor in the lower decks of a warship and you live in a mess with 50 people, your lives are shared. They know what you listen to, they know what you read, they know what you think about, because that's how you are, and you talk about things. And there were plenty of times there when you get challenged in your thinking. And so you've got to have a reason for why you think what you do.
It's a good training ground that you are interacting, trying to answer people. probably as a young man, so that if your belief and values are strong and the idea is good, it'll stand.
Yeah, and I'm always wary of dogmatism, even within my own, the people of my own faith that make your argument, and I think even in that the arguments should stand on their own. I'm very much a believer in that way of thinking and that way of approaching facts, information, history, those sorts of things.
How might we, because when people start labeling on either side of the political spectrum each other, it's an easy way out to not to have the truth being conversed and to assume agency or to assume that let's have the long form discussion rather than a short, quick bites and then just quickly label you and move to the next one.
Yeah.
How might we create that political dialogue which gives that space of, being wrong also?
I think it's fascinating the last few years watching this as there's been this attempt to start to suppress speech and suppress the things that people can talk about. I think this is where you get the rise of people like Joe Rogan. And I think Joe Rogan is an honest inquisitor that he walks into these discussions very open. I think that's the magic of Joe Rogan is he's obvious that he's done a bit of reading, a bit of background, but he's actually going into them honestly wanting to know with no, in a lot of cases, no preconceived idea. And it's almost as if these forums are starting to pop up outside of the normal channels, essentially. So mainstream media that very much controls what the narrative is and controls very closely what the talking points are and those sort of things. It's becoming less and less relevant. And it's forums, I think, like this and others, like Joe Rogan, trying to think of a number of others where that opportunity to speak openly and freely is allowed for, even if it's offensive at times and even if it's challenging at times. And that willingness and that ability to disagree, I think we've lost a lot of that. And many of the politicians, or as in people on the spectrum side, either side of the politics, people will stay within their own echo chambers, and then they will go to specific forums. They don't want to cross-pollinate. It'll be difficult to get people on both sides on a platform and having talked on, because the more we know each other, whatever the views are, the more closer we get in terms of understanding. Whether I agree doesn't make a difference, but I can understand you better. From there on, as in the idea of freedom, liberties, and rights, how do you see that playing in West Australian context? And what's your broad observation? That's a big question. Freedoms, liberties, and rights. I guess I'll start with rights. We've moved into an era, maybe in the last half a century, where there's a lot more talk about rights, and people seem to be claiming all sorts of rights all over the place. It's a hard one. What rights do we actually have? It sort of started out of rights, right for shelter, right for food, right to, and then you've got the UN Declaration of Human Rights and various other things like that. But there seems to be this growing sense of rights. But what you need to realise is that for every right, there's a corresponding responsibility on someone else, or there's a corresponding opposite of that right on someone else. So if you say that I have a right to housing, it's like, okay, what does that actually mean? How is that played out? Does that mean that someone else has to provide you that housing? And what right, is there a right that you've just violated as a result of that? Because they might go, well, I've got a right to the fruits of my labour, and you have no right to impinge upon that. So now you've got this conflict of rights. Whose right is the most important? Whose right is a right or not? So I think I'm not sure we'll answer it. We'll answer the questions entirely here, but for every right there is a corresponding other side to it, and there is an effect to every right that we claim. It's a bit like parents, that a child has a right. Say I think it's the rights of the children, but there's a child has a right to two parents or something along those lines. That means there's a responsibility of the parents to take care of that kid. Now, I'd say that absolutely, that's a responsibility, and I will take the sacrifices that I need to take for that. But if someone says, I don't know, another right to be, I don't know, I have a right to be especially recognised for my eye colour, then what does that mean? Does it mean that everyone has to create a special line for you, and that the taxpayers have to pay to have a special line of, these are the people with a special eye colour, all need to have their own special lane where they go through this, or special things that are all going to cost everyone else.
And then it becomes very broad. Then it loses its value. So what do you think are the core ones one should focus on? You can't have too many. As an example, you can't go further, and everything can't be right. There has to be a difference between right and privileges. Yeah.
To be honest, it's not in terms of core rights,
core freedoms.
Core freedoms. It's a hard one to nail down. The United States have got their Bill of Rights. That's interesting in terms of how it is. There these enumerated rights. A big part of those rights are the right to. It enumerates things that others cannot do to you. So your rights to. It doesn't say that you have a necessarily a right to be unmolested by the government unduly, but it's got. There's certain things, rights of free speech, which in Australia we have as an implied right to free political expression. Some of those are enumerated, and some of those are the things that have to be that are worked out in society. The Anglo sort of the outworking, I guess, for Australia and in the Anglosphere essentially is those rights that were, I guess, originally enumerated in the Magna Carta. They're the rights to the habeas corpus, that if you're going to you've got to be brought before your accuser, and you've got to present the man, those sorts of things. I think there's a whole bunch of other ones in there. Some of them are a little bit arcane now and don't really apply. But that's a good foundation. But then by no means complete. But they set, I think, in place a relationship between the state. Then it was the king, and the lords of the time, and wasn't really citizenry, it was really peasantry. Set the relationship. So the rights part of it is really more of a relationship expression, rather than saying you have this right to, you have a right to a home, you have a right to clean drinking water. They should all really be implied within that.
If I have to bring that concept to today, so we have two plays. One is the government, the state, and the individual. So the individual gives the power to the government to legislate, execute, and whereas the government, what's the relationship between the power, which sits in between, of giving in and both giving and controlling power? So the individual gives the power to the government and people in power to run on their behalf, and then in lieu, the people in power control power or control rights and freedoms of the individuals.
I think those rights, I tend to hold more of an American view of those, that we have these pre-existing rights. It's a bit like Blackstone, natural law theory, and all of the rest of it, which sort of ties in with the American way. These rights are self-evident, that they are transcendent, come from God, if you will. So the rights themselves of the individual transcend government. Someone was saying, I think in the US, they're saying that government gives you rights. It's like, no, I don't think the government actually does give you rights. I think they pre-exist government. The relationship between the government and the citizen is the social contract essentially is that we as citizens need to be governed. We agree that we're going to elect these people to I guess try and understand how that relationship works out. I balk a bit at the term. Americans use it a lot. We're using it more now. Lawmakers, and I guess in a way, in Parliament we are making law. But I think there's a danger there if you think that government can make any law that it wants out of whole cloth, essentially. I think that's a misunderstanding of who we are as people and where our fundamental rights come from, essentially. The relationship we have within the state and the way that the Westminster system is set up, for example, talking about the sort of the hybrid system, but essentially the Westminster system is it recognises that every man, every person that you put in that position of control is a flawed human being. I think that's from where I come from and the history I come from, that's kind of a Christian concept of all have fallen short of the glory of God. We're all fallen and left to our own devices that would become tyrannical if given enough power. So I think the system that we have recognises that and says we cannot put one person in power and we cannot put one part of government in power. So in order to ensure that rights are properly balanced, then we have these, you have the legislature, the judiciary and the executive, and those are kept separate. And we try to keep the power as distributed as widely as possible to avoid one person from having total control of that power. And as what Lord Acton says, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's the system in place that protects us from our own worst devices.
Wow.
Yeah.
And as you, it's how many, 6 months, 8 months in Parliament?
No, not quite. 22nd of May. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay.
May, June, July, about 6 months. Yeah, roughly. Yeah.
In terms of the conversations happening at the parliamentary level, what are the key focus areas on both sides, and where do you think the focus should be, and there should be, and where's the focus right now, and then where the focus should be to create economic wealth and prosperity for the state?
I could give you all the usual answers of red tape and freeing things up. And arguably this government's doing some of that, but it's doing that in interesting ways. I guess my position on things is, I guess an example of what we one of the benefits, I'm 50, nearly 55, of being around for a little while, is you can remember you can remember how things were, and it's always good. This is why history is really important. And you remember how things were, and it gives you an indication of where you are now. So I guess maybe not the best example, but one of the examples I can give is in 1995, my wife and I built a house. So that house cost us under $100,000, house and land, which I did this exercise in today's language is about $200,000. So that house cost us under $100,000. From the pad going down to us actually taking the keys for that house, it took 12 weeks. And it was a good house. It wasn't a massive house, but it was a decent sized house. 12 weeks before we could move into that house. Now that's unheard of, because at the moment it's something like 17 months in Western Australia.
I was wondering.
So what's the solution? I don't know. As someone who's a conservative, people go, "Oh, you just keep looking backwards." It's like, well, I don't. I'm actually think there's a place for being progressive, but it's being progressive in the right directions. I don't think we're progressing things in the right direction when a house that then was equivalent to $200,000 is now $600,000-$700,000 house today. So something's gone wrong between then and now. The fact that a house goes from 12 weeks to build a house to more than 12 months to 15, 17 months to build a house, something has gone wrong between then and now. So what has gone wrong between then and now? I think a big part of it is the amount of red tape again. Reading somewhere the other day that something like 3,000 pages of regulation that you need to follow to build a house in Western Australia now.
Oh, okay.
So back then there was nothing like that. Was my house more dangerous? There's a lot of environmental stuff that's been put on houses now to save energy. Another very interesting discussion I'd love to have about this whole push to save energy and make energy-saving houses. But what it's done is it's made houses very, very expensive. very difficult to build and added a whole heap of extra layers into it. So we've complicated the process all the way along. Government's got more and more involved in housing. It's got more and more expensive and more difficult to actually attain. So I think in that level, we need to look at, have we allowed government to become too involved in housing? What do we need to do to get them out? And we need to be bold to do that. We need to be prepared to make some big steps. I'm not sure that there's anyone in government at the moment who's actually able to do that, because it's built in so many. It's not just vested interest in that process being there. It's the ability to walk back those things. So you go, okay, well, this safety standard is way over the top. You take that safety standard out, someone gets injured, gets hurt, gets killed. Suddenly, that was the reason why that was the problem, and whoever made that decision was the problem for that. And I think part of the issue we have is that we have a tendency now to take examples from the particular and apply them to the whole. So rather than look at things overall and go, well, actually, that seemed like a good idea to put that in, for example, say a safety feature. Seemed like a good idea to put that in. But what was the justification? Was it really a problem? But what was the cost overall? And I think we've just had build up of time of those sorts of issues. But it's not just housing; it's in every industry. Every industry we've got oil and gas takes years to develop, and there's a lot of pushback on oil and gas projects and resources projects. Infrastructure project costs have all blown out because of the studies and the inability to move forward on anything, because no one wants to make a decision, because there's so many layers of bureaucracy in the middle of it all, and layers of compliance in the middle of it all, that actually make it impossible to move. And it creates a deterrent to being able to do anything, because one, the cost goes up, but also the time to market goes through the roof, which means that the longer it takes to get to market, the worse and worse an investment it is over time. It's the remove the red tape as a throwaway answer, but it's
as a headline, but there's so much underneath.
There's so much underneath, but we talk about that, but it's got to take some pretty bold moves to actually reverse that, and I think we need to be prepared to say, actually, this was a bad idea.
And what do you feel about in terms of specifically on energy, as using energy security to be sovereign, to use energy security, have a good mix of energy sources so that you have stability in the grid?
I think, and I'm certainly not an energy expert, but I think the direction we've gone, and the more I've been thinking about it recently, is this, reducing energy usage. As I said in a speech, my budget and reply speech, that there are no first world countries that are low energy usage, that our prosperity and our future growth is all directly tied to energy use and cheap, reliable, base load energy use. Without it, we can't grow. So we start to constrain it down, and that's what I think we've seen in Australia, is that as you start to constrain the supply of energy, it started with light bulbs. Back in the day, we started getting rid of incandescent light bulbs, and we replaced them with fluorescent light bulbs, which actually proved to be a very bad idea, because they're very toxic when they break, and they become an environmental issue as well that no one talks about now. So now we've gone to LED globes. Okay, fine, and there's some good technology came out of that. But the focus has been this reduction of energy, because we have limited electricity. So where I'm going with this is we need to think about, I think we need to stop thinking that way, and we need to stop thinking about energy reduction and think about how we can actually increase the amount of energy that we've got available to us. For Australia, talk about coal in a second if you like. For Australia, the fact we put a moratorium on nuclear energy back around the time of the GST. So that was a deal that was done with the Australian Democrats, who no longer exist, to get the GST over the line. Because nuclear energy in Australia at that time was totally unviable. There was no real reason to have it. Most of our energy came from coal, and coal is really still by far the cheapest form of energy production. And there's probably people who will argue that point. But where we are now, if we want to have relatively cheap, plentiful energy, nuclear is probably the only thing that's going to give it to us in any quantities. And for a country like Australia, we should be an energy superpower in that respect. Gas is a no-brainer, but we have the largest reserves, or some of the largest reserves of uranium in the world. Nuclear, in terms of being a safe form of energy production, is the safest by far still, despite, you've had 3 Mile Island, you've had Chernobyl, and you've had Fukushima. Despite even all of those, it's still the safest form of energy production in the world. Yet in Australia, we have this weird situation where we can't even consider it. I'm reading an interesting book by Tim Gregory about nuclear energy. The guy's a total greenie. He's a total environmentalist, but he understands how critical cheap, plentiful energy is.
To be conservationist.
As a conservationist, because that's what gives you the prosperity. And it's only prosperous nations that have the luxury of taking care of the environment the way that we do. And there's very few countries that are as good as Australia at it in that respect. Yet this is denied to us. Most other countries in the world have access to nuclear energy. Most other green movements in the world have turning, not all turned, but a lot of them turned and turning favourable to nuclear energy. In the meantime, I've been thinking about this a lot. We shun coal in Australia, and we tear down the coal-fired power stations, and we say how terrible they are and how evil and dirty and all the rest of it they are. Yet we still export large quantities of coal to China and the rest of the world that we can't burn here.
But it's morally flawed, that argument, logically flawed, but it's still being burnt.
It's still being burnt.
So if the argument is that it'll create more carbon emissions, but somebody else is creating carbon emissions, and you can't control the air or the environment around Australia, it'll go around. So it's a flawed argument from that point of view.
It's a morally flawed argument for a number of reasons, and one is that have been thinking this through a lot. It's we've got the Greens keep going on about now they're after gas, but coal is definitely is just evil in their sight. Yet I won't listen to a moment of their arguments until I see them protesting outside the front of the Chinese consulate and other consulate, maybe the Indian consulate as well, because India's building coal-fired power stations at a fairly large rate. So if you're really, really serious about that, we've been knocking down our coal-fired power stations and we've been shutting them down. Australia's on that track. I don't necessarily think that's the smartest thing to do, but as long as we seem to give China, India, and other countries like that a free pass on coal-fired power generation. We shouldn't be preventing ourselves from having it. I know they use that argument. Oh, Australia needs to lead the world in all of this. It's like, well, are we? Are they? Is China following us? In this respect. I'm not convinced.
The defense and the defense industry are two different parts, and as you said, that one of your research or your studies is focused on oil and gas and defense. So, if you can talk more on the idea of creating how defense industry or how a fledgling or thriving defense industry can provide the idea of being sovereign and the sort of sovereignty for a country.
That sovereign capability.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I said in a speech the other day that I think what's happening in Western Australia in terms of defence industry is something akin to the iron ore revolution that we had back in started in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and gas. So you're talking about Sir David Brand and Sir Charles Court, that era where they opened up mining to the rest of the world. I think that WA has an opportunity there. Again, it's tied to energy, and it's tied to there's some difficult challenges around that in terms of manpower, the ability to actually execute that work. When I was preparing for my budget and reply speech, I found a couple of different studies that had been done by government in terms of the workforce required. One of them said 2,500 more people required. Then the next one said 10,000 more people required. So what is it? We don't even really know how many people we need. But there are opportunities. I think, I came from, just before I came into Parliament, I worked for a very, very, very small, very innovative company that was doing some amazing work, putting various technologies together in the IT and OT sort of space. But if you look around Perth, and I've had the opportunity to visit a few places, we're doing some incredibly innovative stuff, still at relatively small scale in Perth. That shows to me that we've got the people who are driven to do that. Australia, we pride ourselves in a way as being the country that came up with the Hills Hoist and the sunshine Wi-Fi, the sunshine harvester. I think that we forget that it's there. I think it's still there, and there's I've been
the mindset of being innovative.
Oh, it's incredible. I've spent a fair bit of time around people within the defence industry networks in Perth, and just getting to know who's who, and finding out all of these little companies that are doing these amazing things in drone tech, which is exploding in terms of its requirement, and it's one of those disruptive technologies, and it's been disruptive in the Ukraine war. I think something like 70% of the kills in the Ukraine war are drone kills. So the technology around that and around the countering of all of those is incredible. A few years ago in oil and gas, before subsea AUVs were being considered in terms of, in a military context, they were being used to survey the coast off Western Australia. So the technology is already here, and there's companies already doing that. Now, as we move into a heightened sense of strategic insecurity, then a lot of those technologies are coming across into the defence space fairly quickly. A good example of that is, you heard of the Ghost Shark?
Yeah.
So Ghost Shark, the remotely operated submarine, that a young entrepreneur, I think I've forgotten the name of the company now, but the company is named after the sword in Lord of the Rings. And this is a young guy who was a geek who set up his own company, thought differently. He's just been awarded a massive project by the Australian government to build this Ghost Shark. But there's people like that all over Australia. Part of the problem has been here, from what I've been told from people in industry, is we've been so, I'd say, stop-start. We've flipped from one government to another federally in particular. We've done strategic update, strategic analysis, one after the other. We've reshaped it one after the other. Every time we do that, everything's put on hold. All these companies are put on hold. Some of them disappear because they just can't stay in the industry. Other ones, even I was talking to one of the larger companies, it's the first time in their history that they actually had to start downsizing in Western Australia since being here because of that uncertainty around investment. Hopefully that's starting to change now. But I guess my point there is that the defence spending that's happening and that opportunity that's there, there's an opportunity in Western Australia in particular to create a whole new manufacturing base. We just have to support the industries that are getting there as they go through it. I guess an interesting part of that is that you don't want your manufacturing base to be just arms and armament, those sorts of things.
But those skills can be expanded to other industries also. So the skills are probably similar.
Yeah, I think it's
in terms of engineering.
I think we're at an interesting point. The gas industry in particular, the resources industry, and even mining are changing the shape of how they function. The automation that's happening in mining is phenomenal. Companies like Rio are automating very, very complex systems quite rapidly, which changes the mix of people that you have. It's taking some people out of that industry. The years that I worked in oil and gas and subsea, pipeline and subsea hardware and equipment design, that's all changing fairly rapidly. Some of the skills have gone offshore, but I think some of them will come back. But there's a lot of people in there who have skills to not just design, but also in the execution and management of projects and those sorts of things that can come out of those industries and transfer into where we are with defence. The Americans. I went to a lunch with the American Chamber of Commerce about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and the US don't have the manufacturing capacity themselves on things like particularly the Virginia class submarines, but other manufacturing. So they're looking to Western Australia. Austal's the only company outside of the US that's built US warships. They've got a factory in the US, but they're an Australian company operating in the US, and they're about to build a bunch of more warships in Western Australia. So, there's a lot of opportunity, but my fear with that is that the government is actually the thing that's in the way, and needs to just get on and do it.
What kind and how we can attract good people towards politics, and why are we feeling that dearth of quality of politicians who are leaning into politics, or people are engaging with politics? How can we, if you have to go back in history and put our finger at what happened there, because of which the engagement of average citizen reduced, or what happened there? And what are the trends you see, and what are the insights you think from that point of view?
You're going to ask me how to solve that problem now. No. As we were talking about that, another thought did sort of cross my mind as we're going through that. So we were talking about the diminishing engagement over time. I was sort of saying that the first unit I did at university, second unit actually, I did philosophy as my first one. The second one I did was on political science. One of the second ones I did was political science, and I just did that because it fit in with the time frame that I was working full time and studying. But that was where I first learned about social capital and how important that is, and we looked at political engagement how it had fallen away over the years and what that actually meant. And it does have a bearing on, I think, the type of people that one first get to end up in. I think in political office, you need to be engaged with the political system beforehand for men. Not all people. Some people come in like superstars from the outside. I think there's a place for that, but that needs to be. It can't be everything. But the people come in through that system. So I guess we've got the pipeline is smaller. The people who understand how that pipeline works is smaller, and then also the number of people actually engaging in that system, and the system maybe becomes a little easier to manipulate. The other thing that sort of crossed my mind just as we sort of started to talk was the difference in incomes in time have shifted fairly dramatically. The people at the top of the CEO level, the people who are working at that higher level in industry, those at the upper management level, even the upper bureaucrats, that has shifted fairly dramatically over the last probably 30, 40 years. That once upon a time, someone who came into the parliament was actually paid a lot of money and paid somewhere up near that level, somewhere in reasonably near that level. Now when you compare what the salary is of a member of parliament, despite everything that people say, many people are coming into parliament now are actually taking a pay cut. So maybe you're bringing in people that are more service oriented, great. But at the other side of things, you're not actually attracting a lot of those people.
Good talent.
The good talent coming in, and maybe that's why the mix from people who are previously staffers, which sits at around about 40-50%, depending on the party, has grown as such a large percentage of those, because to come through the staff system, becoming a member of parliament tends to be a pay increase. But even your senior bureaucrats, you look at what the senior bureaucrats are on now, they're on much more than members of parliament.
You're right.
So that has shifted fairly dramatically.
And there are many public federal bureaucrats who get paid more than the Prime Minister.
Yeah, many. Yeah, the director generals and things like that get paid, in some cases double or more than the Prime Minister. So there's that factor. The solution to that is probably not very publicly palatable. You do like Singapore. I think Singapore, their members of parliament get paid a reasonable amount, but their ministers get paid a lot of money. There's up around that level of what, say, a CEO of a reasonable sized company would be. Not asking for more money, because I'm not in this game for the money, but it's how do we explain kind of the managerial kind of approach that we seem to have to political leadership, rather than the statesman type of leadership that we had before. I'm not saying that was perfect, but it seemed to be more prevalent
in the past. On the whole spectrum of philosophy, and I read fair bit, but I want your view in terms of which philosophers did you felt aligned with, or which sounded right to you, and who do you want to follow, or who do you like following or reading?
Probably the most I got out of the philosophy unit I did, it actually rocked my world pretty heavily, because that was the first time I was really confronted with some very, very, I guess, astute arguments against some of the positions I held, because up until that point, I had positions on things, but some of them couldn't stand up to some of the philosophical arguments. Some later on did, because I overthought some of those philosophical arguments sound like they hold more water than they do. Probably the most important thing was really that critical thinking element that came through that. It was philosophy 101 that came through that unit, and I found it very, very useful. We studied all of the, Kant and all of those. I'm not going to go into the various arguments for or against the existence of God, or our existentialists and all of those sorts of things. I don't read philosophy for the sake of philosophy. Probably read a lot more political philosophy over the years. Yeah. Some of it's biographical. Been down the road of looking through sort of economic philosophy. Went down a bit of a libertarian streak there, and a bit of a narco-capitalist sort of a streak there for a while. I've, read the Mises, Rothbard, trying to think of them, Hayek. Who else? There's quite a few others in there.
But then you picked up Friedman. A
bit of Milton Friedman, but no, I haven't read widely on Friedman. But I think they're more practical philosophies for day-to-day use. Reading Kant, okay, cool. I don't know if you're struggling with the existence and why you're here, and those sorts of the Descartes, you're wondering why, I think therefore I am, all of that sort of stuff. I went through that a long, long time ago, and went through the challenges of my own thinking. I guess what that did do for me, though, is that it gave me a strength of conviction that if you are genuinely and truly arguing your point, and you are genuinely listening to one side and the other, that's nothing to be afraid of. I think many people are afraid of their ideas being challenged. So when you challenge their worldview, they're either coming at it from a non-genuine perspective, and that can be right across the spectrum. It can be religious, non-religious. You can be an atheist. You can be, the transgender thing. All of these a lot of these ideologies. The minute you are no longer willing to discuss them from that philosophical basis and from sort of first principles and things like that, then it just sort of shows that you're not actually that certain about your views, and you're not actually that willing to learn and to discuss and debate that you've actually got something else going on there.
Industrial revolutions have always, led and created wealth for those economies which are fronted them and then led the way, and they are part of the that hockey stick or the growth curve, and they take that opportunity and time to use that.
Yeah.
So we are in the fourth industrial revolution right now, and which is led by AI and data.
Yeah.
And currently it's been managed. AI at the back end is run by 4 large American companies and then one Chinese.
Yeah.
And everybody are using their corollaries or their versions in the front end as products, but essentially they are bare 4 American and 1 Chinese.
Yeah.
The bigger question is countries who would create some form of the idea of AI sovereignty, that as a country you do your competition on the land. You don't outsource your competition to a different country, because when you're outsourcing those competitions to a different country, you're outsourcing the information as well.
Yeah.
So how might we become AI sovereign through, for example, having more semiconductor chips being created here, data centers, and that requires, again, almost doubling of our energy requirements. And that conversation is important, critical to be had probably in these coming years at federal and state level both. How do you see that the fourth round of industrial revolution being critical for the next round of economic growth?
Again, it's something I've only really dipped my toe in terms of what does AI mean. It's obviously critical going forward. There's so much in there, just purely on the energy part of it alone is having to make the world rethink energy. That's why when we think about saving money on light bulbs or saving energy on light bulbs and those sorts of things, and you go, actually, an AI search, query takes 16 times more energy than a Google search query.
Yeah.
All of this other stuff goes out the window. You've got companies like Facebook and Google buying nuclear reactors essentially because they see that they're the ones leading the way in terms of knowing that we cannot continue down this road without the energy supply to do that.
Security for them to have energy of their own, so they are running.
Yes, their own in terms of So the sovereign energy, the sovereign part of their AI, their AI model, the model. I guess that's the interesting part of it is the the sovereignty of their data centers, I suppose, for want of a better word. And I'm no expert on how AI works, but in terms of, say, the sovereignty of those data centers, which is company sovereignty essentially, what do you do if a company owns all of your data and owns access to all of your data, or a foreign country owns access to all of your data? Then you're very, very vulnerable. So I don't think we have, maybe from a government point of view, we have some sovereign data centers. But in terms of all of that information, that data related to AI as it's growing exponentially, I don't even know if we've got the capacity to manage it locally. I know from a cybersecurity point of view, the requirements are for more and more onshoring of data. The last company I worked for, we had to go down that road of onshoring data. In terms of sovereign AI, I was in a conversation the other day with that, and Australia's not even really looking at it as far as I know. Maybe there are people, because we're now relying on AI more and more particularly for military and defensive requirements. So who has the access to the data centers? Who has the access to the computational power of that? Where does that all reside? I think there's some vast vulnerabilities there.
Yeah.
And that's not even going into the vulnerabilities of the system itself.
And keeping the idea of mining as a state, we mine a lot. So the new age mining is data mining.
Yeah.
So to give an example, class example of healthcare.
Yeah.
So Australia being the world's best medical research country, and there are models which are learning on Australian healthcare information.
Yeah.
And then creating products. But that's our IP.
Yeah.
So one should be paid royalties on the information, because that will model learned from the information.
Yeah.
And then that taxpayer money being spent on research. So the new age mining will be more data as we go into this sector. But there should be more talks on creating guardrails and regulation around it. How do you create your own sovereign capabilities, bring competition back here, and how do you manage that information as well?
Yeah, it's I've only really had to look at that from the point of view as a member of parliament. Is that we've got access to the various different things like Copilot and ChatGPT and all of those sort of things. So there's confidentiality issues around that.
Yeah.
What information? Okay, you might want to write a letter back to someone. You just chuck their letter in and say, please write a response to this letter that says X, Y, and Z. And you could do that, but you've just breached confidentiality requirements. But there's no clear guidelines around all of that. But you've got company data. Used to be protecting company IP was actually physical servers. It was some of it people actually getting into offices to get access to the materials that were in the offices, but now it's stored elsewhere. But now I guess a lot of that information, as it starts to get plugged into these AI models, into these AI queries, quite innocently, ends up, once it's out, it's out. I don't know what has been done. One
of the conversation angle on from a social point of view, and there are tools and then there are agents which are AI companions.
Yeah.
So people are interacting with AI companions as human form.
Yeah.
And young people and I was again that rabbit hole of AI companions. I went down that rabbit hole and watched a few documentaries and a few interviews of people who have used AI companions. The two part of the extreme ends. One end is then people who are interacting with the companion. For a young person with some intellectual disabilities, this person is already socially isolated.
Yeah.
And then interacts with this person and with AI companion and wants to be in relationship with this AI companion and want to get married, because those companions are all affirming all the time, available all the time, and no human relationships are all affirming all the time, happy and positive all the time, and available all the time. So, and that takes away the opportunity for that young person to have a meaningful relationship, beyond, and then further isolates that person. But on the flip side is if there's an elderly person in the aged care system who are already isolated, and they might use this tool in a positive fashion, that just somebody interactive in their own language, in their own accent.
Yeah.
So there are social issues to be worried about as well.
Yeah, and I've heard a little bit about some of these issues. I think it's actually a dangerous road to go down. I was actually listening to something last night, and it was talking about, this is somewhat related, but it's talking about our devices and all of those sort of things. The question was about things like dopamine and serotonin and those sorts of things. And one of the things about our devices is that we get on this device and, this just feeds us dopamine kick, and it's a bit like a little drug addiction. But and the question was asked about relationships, as in why men and women, young men and women, are struggling to actually have these relationships, and they're struggling to actually bond emotionally, and this ability to fall in love is actually almost impossible for them, because they're so resistant to dopamine. That part of when a couple meet and they're attracted, there's this dopamine. A big part of that they're saying is a big dopamine hit, and over time in relationships that sort of gradually shifts and it becomes more serotonin based, and you settle into the relationship. And if it's I've been married 33 years. My relationship with my wife is probably more serotonin based now. We're not at that point we're certainly not at that point when we first met, and it was like the spark and all of those sort of things. But what they're saying now about these young couples as they meet is that they can't even get that spark because they've been fed this overstimulated system. So I think the danger of that, I guess the agent is of it, you go, okay, well, it's helpful for someone on a disability, but you either always know you're disconnected or you end up actually in a kind of a delusory state. But I can only see that getting more and more prevalent because it's easy, right? It's like you get onto you talk to the thing, and rather than actually getting up, having to have a shower, clean yourself up, get dressed, smell good, and get in the car and go out and meet someone and do that initial that initial meeting and all those sorts of things, which is nerve-wracking, and it's all part of being a human. It's much, much easier just to go, I'm just going to get companionship from this machine, from this. So I think it's actually dangerous to do that, and you're seeing that. I think you're seeing that with a lot of young men. It's actually easy just to hang out and play games and do all those sorts of things than it is to actually get up and go out and challenge yourself, because it's the easy path. I don't know what the solution to that is. How do you stop that? How do you prevent that? I think the problems are more you need to take a proactive approach on that societally, I think, rather than actually trying to work out how you put guardrails around that part. I'm not sure what that would look like.
You talked about your faith earlier in the opening, and how is that relationship within your faith and your faith? How has that evolved, and then where you're at, and in terms of values and beliefs from that point of view?
Okay. I guess I grew up sort of as a young kid my mother was Anglican. I went to a Catholic boarding school. My brother got confirmed as an Anglican when he was 14. I got asked to be confirmed if I wanted to be confirmed as an Anglican at 14. I said no, because I didn't believe in God. I joined the Navy at 16, and at that point I didn't believe in God, but I was one of these guys. I was always wondering what's out there. But in April of 1998, I was at a retreat which the Navy actually put on. It was a character development retreat. The Navy, I don't know if they still run those sorts of things, but it ran it for a week, and they talked about all sorts of things. I was an angry young man, and I was a frustrated young man, I suppose, in some respects, because I knew there was more to life than what was going on in my head, and going out and drinking every weekend as a young sailor and doing all dumb young sailor things. But the last couple of days of that retreat, we had a gentleman, one of the chaplains, Brian Daniels, and he just talked about various things to do with relationships and faith and things. But what struck me about Brian was this calmness that Brian had, and this sense that Brian had about him. And I just said, sir, because he was my superior, I said, what is it that you have that I don't have? And he told me that he was a Christian, and then we went through what that meant, and then he asked me if I believed in Jesus, and I said, well, I don't know. And he asked me a few other questions. He said, is that something that you think you could? And I went, yeah, I think I could. And and I knew I was a rat bag. So part of that belief was sort of putting that behind me and repenting effectively, saying I'm sorry for all of that. And it was unexpected to me. I didn't walk into that thing going, this is what's going to happen, and had no idea what to expect out of it. But one of the weird things that happened, as a young sailor, like many, I used to swear like a trooper. So I swear like a sailor. That actually almost entirely stopped within a day. It's just one of those weird things that just, so that was when I was 18. And 1989 actually. I was 18. It wasn't all plain sailing because it's in the press. I got arrested as a 19-year-old, as a young Christian guy who got in trouble with some bouncers in Victoria. Got arrested and charged and convicted, and thanks to our former Premier Mark McGowan, who could have been a better lawyer at that point, I think would have got me off.
And he was a lawyer.
What's that?
He was a lawyer.
He was my lawyer in the Navy, yeah. So I broke a window as part of an altercation with some bouncers in Victoria, and got charged with willful damage, and offered to pay for the window, but they still went ahead and pressed charges, I think, to make an example of me. And I was actually going on deployment overseas, and I went to Lieutenant McGowan at the time and said, I've got this blue form from the Victorian Police, can you help me? And so he said, well, if you want to go to sea and you can't appear in court to make your case, then we'll write you a letter. So the letter didn't work. I got convicted in the end anyway, paid for the window, paid my fine, and sort of the rest is history. But no, I've been a Christian since 1989. What does it mean? It means that I hold to the tenets of Christian faith. That's been tested. I sort of said I studied philosophy. That rocked my world because that tested a lot of those tenets that I had that I'd sort of taken on board, because that's what the Bible says. So I'd taken those on board without really having them challenged. That was very, very hard. But going through that, and it took a few years. That's what gave me the confidence in my faith, because those things got challenged, they got worked through, and I came out of it going, no, actually, they are, to me, they are right, they are true, and so, it's the foundation of the worldview that I come from.
How do you, what does a father of six look like, in terms of the management of it?
I don't know. It's been a while since I was the father of six. I'm the father of eight now.
Father of eight?
I'm father of eight, yeah.
So how does the management of 8 kids looks like? How do you do it?
Well, I only have 3 at home now.
Okay.
But no, we had 8. For a long time we had 8 at home. All through that, 6 through to 8. Having an amazing wife helps. Who's someone who's highly, highly organised. Colour coding works. So we had, all of our kids had colour-coded cups and plates and those sorts of things.
Oh, dear Lord.
Colour-coded towels. They all had, there was a schedule, and the schedule had them in their various colours and all of these sorts of things. So that was a management tool, and it worked.
Wow.
I was working pretty hard all through that. I was, I worked in oil and gas. We raised 8 kids on a single income.
Wow.
So, I had to work hard to be able to be in a position where we had enough of an income to do that. Managing them,
or being a father, being a parent, not just managing.
Yeah, being a parent. Yeah, well, there's a management element of it, but no, being a parent. Gosh, where do you start? It's having a clear understanding of what you're doing, having a clear understanding that we were the parents and the children weren't. When we had our first daughter, we had no idea what we're doing. We would leave her. Well, we wouldn't leave her, but we'd let her fall asleep anywhere, and our routine was all over the place. We kind of had no idea. And a friend of ours said, "This is crazy. What are you doing?" And so we started to actually, we met some people and got some advice, and we actually got involved with a parenting group and end up facilitating these, really about getting your children into routines and understanding why you're raising them. That actually, as a parent, you're the ones who create their world for them. I was listening to a thing the other day, and it said you create their solar system. That as a parent, they look to you as the sun and the moon, essentially, and they revolve around you. So you need to be stable and you need to be together. And one of the things that we did as parents, our primary focus was that our relationship, my wife and wife Meredith and my relationship were good together. So that our children could always see that relationship. Other parts of that to make sure that their world was as stable as possible. We actually moved a lot. I can tell you how many times we moved. We moved maybe every year for probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. We were renting in a housing market similar to what it is now, not as bad, but similar to what it was now, where you'd have to move every year because of, people were buying and selling houses. But the routine, the daily routine and those sorts of things, we've always ate meals together as a family, always. Bit less now because we've got older grown-up kids and they're not around. But that was really important, and having mum available for the kids to make sure they got through breakfast, got through their days, taking care of all of those routine things about them. That was what helped, what enables you to get through that. We homeschooled our kids as well, most of them, through that period. So again, it was routine, but it's also the community around us. So we had a very, very strong community all around us. And that's only really just ended recently because of, our youngest daughter, we put her into a school. So it's sort of knowing where you're going, and we haven't been perfect parents, but we've tried to, from a father's point of view, my wife has been very, very good at teaching the children, those foundational things of education. For me, I've tried to teach my children as I'm going. So we did a lot of walking. We rock climbed together, abseiled together.
Bushcraft?
Bit of bushcraft. We weren't so big on the survival thing, although my kids have watched Bear Grylls and they've eaten ants when we've been out camping and other things like that.
Protein sources.
But we did a lot of stuff like mountain biking together.
Okay.
And it's in those times together as a family and at times with your kids that, they're the opportunities to tell them about, about what matters in life and about relationships and all those sorts of things. Yeah.
In conclusion, as in your next generation is also joining the forces, and you've passed on that the idea of service to your family. And if you can conclude with that thought and why it is important for you.
Why it's important to me that the idea that they serve is important.
Yeah.
It worries me of where we're going as a country because I joined the Navy. It was actually sort of the Cold War was still on and it was towards the end of the Cold War. It was unlikely that we would go to war with anyone at that point. But I was at sea. I remember I was in the South China Sea when the Gulf War started. And I remember that sense that I had then. I kind of felt a bit like this is what I'd been trained for, born for, sort of thing. My boys, I've got 2 boys in the Army. One's full-time Army as an artillery officer, and the other one's actually going through Army Reserve as an officer now. I guess we've always taught them to serve. We've taught them they've taught and seen the model of the respect for the armed forces and what that means. They know that, if something happened to this country, that would be in a heartbeat. I'm sort of at that. My role now in that age, but I still feel as though if it came down to that I'd be there in a heartbeat. So they've kind of grown up with that thinking. I understand now why older men cry, because they know what it means. We don't talk about. My son's in the Ready Brigade of the Australian Army. They're the ones who'll go first. And recently, when the bombing of Iran was happening around that period, they were put on high alert. So, he's in the Ready Brigade. He's saying today that he'll end up in the Ready Battle Group next year. So they're the ones who go.
The frontline.
They're the frontline guys who go. So,
wow.
I know my son, like any young man in that position, it's kind of what you train for, kind of what you live for. but I also know enough veterans who have served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, those places, and I know the pain that they live with now, and that they live with. That you come away from those different. I'm grateful in many respects that I never had to go into that situation. I served during the Gulf, but I never went to Iraq because a lot of my mates who've come back broken and they have to bear that pain. And that's what we're here for. We're here to defend if we need to, but let's try not to. Let's not rush into that. One of the things I really love about Australia is that we have this, not ambivalence, but we have a good separation between the political and the military generally, and we don't tend to rush into these things. I think it's important that we value the lives of those people who may have to go and do that, and not take it lightly. I think you mentioned national service, and I get asked about conscription a lot. I have an interesting view on conscription. I actually wrote about conscription when I was at uni and got to present my essay to the WA Historical Society, and that was a very moving time because I wrote about the conscription referenda there was two in the First World War, and I just delivered this essay on it where I was explaining why my theory on why Western Australia voted differently and Western Australia and Tasmania voted differently to the rest of Australia. So we voted for. And an old lady in her 90s got up and in the Q&A session afterwards, and she said, "Thank you for the research, the work you've done in writing this and still talking about this." She said the only fight she remembered her parents having was over conscription. So her father had volunteered to go to the First World War. And while he was away, her mother was campaigning for conscription. Her father came back for a few weeks on leave, and she said that was the only fight she ever saw them have, because he was dead set against conscription. He said no man should be compelled to go into what I've been in. National service is a different thing. I think yes, we should be prepared to defend our country, and maybe we need to start thinking about that as more of a militia kind of a force. But conscription itself, it's something that I don't think any government should enter into lightly or even consider lightly. I think on the broader strokes of conscription, that was partly what turned Europe into the meat grinder that it was countries were able to conscript at will millions of men and throw them into the battlefield. I think that's actually a very dangerous thing to put that power into the hands of a government.
Well, thank you for your time today.
Pleasure.